So, so when I was looking for a new city to set up shop 11 years ago, is that I reached out to Bob and just kind of talked about profile, talked about what I was trying to do, and asked him if this would be a good market for me. He said, indeed it was. And this has been the best career decision in my entire life to come to town. And I'm a true believer in FENG, which is help as many people as you can, and just have faith that comes back to you some way, somehow. And it's never steered me wrong, and that's really why I'm here today. Through the course of my time leading the Atlanta chapter, and then as my hobby has developed into coaching executives in transition, over time, I've developed and honed what I think are the 5 essential tools to an effective job search. And through my own experience and experience of many others, been able to supercharge job searches through the years, and I've really gotten every job search I've conducted has gotten me to a better place and a closer match to what really makes me happy. And I'm in my current job as a direct result of that. So I want to take you through these different tools, and there really is they're more than, I guess the value of the whole program is more than the sum of the individual parts. It's because that they are all interrelated, and if you actually use them in an interrelated way, you're going to get maximum value and maximum impact to your search. And there are going to be folks, there are going to be parts of this say, well, I don't know about for my search, or that hasn't been my experience. Is that there are 1,000 ways to get to the other side, and all paths probably work eventually. But I'm just going to share with you a path that has worked repeatedly for people through the years. And for me, my very first search, which was a disaster, but the epitome of hard work and effort, it was 27 months from one permanent job to the next. And there was some interim work involved. There was a car wreck and being laid up for a while involved. And there was just terrible economy in Atlanta involved, but it was 27 months. The next one was 19 months. The next one was 9 months. And then the one after that was down to, it was all of, took me 2 months to figure out what I was going to do next. Then I changed careers, and then took me 2 months to nail down a job in my new career. And the next one after that was 10 weeks. And I ran 2 searches simultaneously. I couldn't decide if I was going to stay in professional services or where I was going to return to finance. And in 10 weeks, I had an offer in both fields. So this, so this works. It does work. It's worked for me. It's worked for my friends. So why don't we get started here? I would encourage you folks that to feel free to ask questions at any time. I guess, do I need to be enabled to share my screen, Nancy? Try letting.
Give me just a second. You can't share your screen?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, give me just a second.
Well, Nancy's setting that up, but just to let you know, I encourage you all to ask questions as we go along, because it's absolutely essential, because all these documents are interrelated. If you don't understand how to use a document, I don't know how you understand how to connect it to others.
You should be able to share now, John. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, the first one I want to start with is this is the ideal job profile. And I start with this because this is the single most important document of your search. And because basically there's the guy that wrote that book, Start with the End in Mind. And the idea is that how do you know what the right job is for you unless you have a clear vision of what that target is? How do you, with a bow and an arrow, how do you hit the target? You just can't pull hard and let it fly and think you're going to get it. And this is, there's a couple of reasons. Let me first explain the document, and then I'd like to share with you a couple of different ways in how the document is used. Is that the purpose of the ideal job profile is to, in a vacuum, when you're not looking at a job description, or you haven't got somebody reach out to say, here's a great opportunity I think you'd be a wonderful fit for, is that your vision is not colored by those opportunities. You're just going to have a chance to sit down and reflect. And to do this thing right takes about 2 hours. Beyond that, if you're spending more than that, you're wasting too much time on it. And really what you want to do here is that I have laid out maybe a dozen attributes of an executive's job that I think are, would be commonly used as a barometer or a characteristic of a job that you would like. And that what you do here is with this thing, now, this is not all inclusive. There are going to be things that are relevant to you, things that you value that I didn't think of here. Now, so therefore, and so what you do, you just add them. There are going to be things in here that aren't relevant for you, and then you just delete them. Now, I used this on my niece for her pursuit of her first job after college. Now, we had to gut this thing and rebuild it because she had things like cool industry was part of her criteria. So I don't think about cool industry when I'm thinking about, finance and accounting, but that was one of the things that she cared about. And so you want to go ahead and then you want to customize the questions in this ideal job profile to really answer the questions of what makes you happy. When we talk about what makes you happy, it's what makes you happy right now. Because what constitutes our ideal job profile, it's the result of a multitude of forces in terms of what you've accomplished so far, what you have yet to accomplish, where you are financially, where you are emotionally, where you are with your family, where they physically reside. It's lots of different factors that continue to change and evolve over time. So it's absolutely essential that when you're embarking on a job search that you give yourself a chance to revisit what's really going to make you happy tomorrow. And so it's very important because as you go through life, your needs are going to change. As a case in point, for the longest time, my ideal job profile was to be a VP of finance in a large firm. Now, I knew more accounting than I care to admit, but I didn't care for it. I didn't care for any tax work. So treasury, I was clueless on. So I knew that being a CFO was not in the cards for me, but I still like the analytical side of finance, and I wanted to take that to its limit. So that's what I wanted. Well, when I moved to Oregon, I was a VP of strategic and financial planning for a $700 million e-commerce firm. And that was fun and interesting. Had my LTIP and my own parking space, part of the leadership team, executive team, and all that. And that was fun. But 4 months later, Bain Capital smashed us into another one of their holdings and evaporated the whole team, really the whole company. Just took our book of business. So so I had to go do something else. So when I came to Atlanta, what I had decided, my ideal job profile is that I had achieved what I wanted. I had achieved being a VP of finance. But when I came to town, I didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me. How was I going to pick the right job? So I decided my ideal job profile it was not going to be a permanent role. It was going to be a project role. It was going to give me a chance for people to get to understand me and my qualifications, and for me to understand where I wanted to be and where I didn't want to be. And then I spent the next 3 years working, after a few months of working continuously in a project mode. And I enjoyed it. But I get tired of working on a job, working to its end on a contract basis. So I decided at that point in time, I really didn't want to stay in finance anymore. So my needs had changed. I want to get out of finance. I want to get more into operations. So I wanted to do that. So I made the shift, got all my documents organized, and then I decided that would make me happiest. And I did that for a while. And then they, in turn, the firm, after several months, decided they wanted me to get involved in business development, which wasn't something I thought about, but they certainly did. They saw something in me that I didn't see. So I started doing that for a while, and that was fun. And then I started traveling all over the country, and that was not fun. And so that job didn't meet my needs. So I left the company. I spent a month trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to finance or stay in professional services. And so I went ahead and I ran 2 different searches. And 10 weeks later, I had offers in both. And so but my needs had changed. And then So, and the thing was, at each junction, I took the time and the discipline to go through this process, look at the ideal job profile and say, you know what, this is what's going to make me happy tomorrow. And this is what I need to do. And just release yourself emotionally from what you used to drive. Maybe you always wanted to be a CFO in a manufacturing firm that's, north of $300 million. And that was something you always wanted. And maybe you're at the point in your career where, you've got a lot of money in the bank. You've got good, you've got a vacation home in Florida that you and your spouse really like, and your kids are well launched, and you really just want to work for a few more years. And then you want to think about, what do I really need to do? I never made CFO, but that's no longer our dream. Now what I need is a job that allows me to get to Florida for long weekends. And so and that's what you want to do. And so therefore you need to change. So what you have to do is you just have to release yourself from the old preferences and then move on into the new one and embrace the new you. And if you do that, you can have a lot of happiness in the next job. Okay, we're done on this. Are we done on this poll, more or less? Yeah, we're all in. Okay, most people, gotcha. Okay, so that's the poll. Okay. Let me just close that. Okay, so let me see. I want to just check and see, do we have questions on this? No. All right. I guess we're all good on questions on this. Okay, that's fine. All right. So what I'd like to, so you go ahead and you fill this out, and then what you want to do is that after you fill it out, then you share it with your better half. And your better half is really good at calling BS on us because they listen more so than we do. And then you can take them through this and they'll tell you, look, you always talked about how you wanted to travel more, travel less, travel to this place. You wanted that this group reporting to you. You didn't want to have IT reporting to you. You want to have a bigger span, a smaller span. You'll figure out, you get great feedback about what you're trying to do. And once you get that feedback from your spouse or your better half or whoever is going to be your brother, your sister, whomever, your best friend, once you get that feedback, now what you've got is an incredibly valuable and impactful document, because this basically is going to be a very accurate read of where happiness lies. So now what do you do with this document? You take this document and you basically, this will then inform your further documents. This will then become your scorecard for other opportunities as they come through. If you've got a dozen characteristics in this ideal job profile and somebody shares a job lead with you, and this is 6 out of 12, you just keep going. It's not worth it for you. If you get this, but if you see another job and it's 8 out of 12, you go, let me do a quick look at this and see if I can triage this and see how fast can I ascertain if I can close the gap on those 4 remaining attributes I'm interested in. If it's 11 out of 12, you basically freeze your schedule, reschedule everything that's out there, and make yourself 100% available to get this thing locked down. And that's what you want. In that way, it'll help you stay focused on what really is going to lead to happiness. And also, I encourage people to take their ideal job profile and to share it with retained recruiters. And say, oh, well, it's got information about my compensation, what I'm looking for, whatever. It's like, stop pretending it's a big secret. If you're honest about what's going to make you happy, then why don't you go ahead and share the information? Because and Cliff can talk to this, and I'd like Cliff to have a comment on this from your role, is that if he or she, recruiter, understands exactly what's going to make you happy, when they talk to their potential clients, roles that they're trying to fill, this is in a language that they're going to be able to say, you know what, I know who's be a solid fit. I know who'd be happy to take this opportunity and run with it. Cliff?
John, I think that helps a lot. And most recruiters now are using good CRMs, right? So they can keep track of what those job searchers or candidates are saying and asking for.
Right. Okay, thanks, Cliff. And I got a question from Craig just asking about this. If do you ignore anything that isn't 100% aligned? No, you don't ignore it. No, I would say, my mark has always been around like 8 out of 12. That's I'll look at 8 of 12 and see what I've got going on. It'd be rare to find something that's perfect. Now, the job that I'm in, yeah, it's perfect for me. But there was, and that was because something I hadn't considered was really benefits, what I'll call old school benefits. And I hadn't thought about that because I haven't seen old school benefits for a very, very long time. And when I got here, after they made the offer letter, they told me about the benefits. I was like, well, I had no idea. So this ended up exceeding my objectives, or it actually hit on something that I hadn't even considered, delivered on something I hadn't even considered. So I got extremely lucky on this role. And that sort of becomes, this thing is, and you write it down, and you stick it in the drawer, and it's always there. And this document will give you emotional balance, because because the thing is, when you've been out for a while and you don't have any interviews that are currently popping, and somebody gives you a call, so, oh, I think you'd be great for this role. Man, nothing is more seductive than when you've got nothing in the pipeline and somebody calls you up and says, I think you'd be great for this role. And you'll lose all balance, and you're going to want to run with it. And you're doing yourself a horrendous disservice. And I just want to make another point around the ideal job profile, is that when I talk about making sure that you kind of reacclimate yourself to your current version of the ideal job profile, there's a huge difference between accepting your current ideal job profile and accepting what's the next thing that comes along. Basically flexing for what's available. Because if you just take the job because it's the next one gets offered to you, chances are it'll be a disaster.
So John, we have a question.
Okay, Mr. Casey.
Once you complete the profile, do you ignore anything that isn't 100% aligned?
Right. Yes, thank you. And I think I touched on that just a minute ago. Yes, with Craig. No, it doesn't have to be 100%. I would say, if you're at 75%, I'd take a look at it. And it doesn't mean I would chase it. I'll take a look at it because I'll use the time to see if I can close the gap. You're probably not going to get to 100%. It might meet 10 or 11 at qualities out of 12. And that would be a really nice job. But I would say, John, Casey, you want to say something? Can John talk? Nancy?
Give me a second while I try to figure that out. Hang on just a second. I can open up John. I don't see him in my list.
Okay. All right. All right.
Sorry, I can't open his line. He's not in my list. John Casey, you said?
Yes.
Hmm?
Well, he's on the participant list.
There he is.
Okay.
John, I've opened your line. Sorry for that.
You just have to unmute, John.
Okay, what I just said is, I find it really a fast way to say, when the interview, what are your hot buttons? What are in your management, the people you manage, what are the characters you like and you dislike in the people reporting to you? And, what does a successful candidate look like to you? And then just sit back and listen, let them talk. And keep that in mind with regards to the kinds of characteristics that you're looking for. And if there's like you said, if there's a close match or at least a 70% match, then you start going back with, yeah, and come back enthusiastically. And that's where you sell yourself, by selling yourself as having those same characteristics or those same desires.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Now, as an example of this ideal job profile, is that there's another group that I lead at BDO, and I had a gentleman in there and talking about, what's going on with your opportunities. And he said, I've got, I have 12 things that I'm working on. And I said, no, you don't. I said, you have 12 things that are taking up your time. You probably have 3 opportunities in there if you're lucky. The other 9 are distracting you from pursuing those 3 opportunities, as well as going off and getting more. So what you really need to do is you need to go back, score those opportunities against your ideal job profile, discard the ones that are not relevant, that aren't high scores. And you're probably going to be disappointed by the number of real opportunities you have, and then use that extra time you now have to go off and go find real winners. And that's what you need to do. Because in my last search that took me 10 weeks, I had taken a month off to prepare myself for my search. I had written up my documents and my ideal job profile. I had 2 ideal job profiles. I had 2 of the other documents we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. And then I had conducted my search. The first 2 weeks of my search, it was 50 hours, 50. And I had identified, I think, 3 opportunities in those first 2 weeks. And then I spent then for the balance of the search, I worked 15 hours a week, 15. And the reason I did that was because I was maintaining calendar flexibility so that when one of these high scoring opportunities was ready to move ahead, I could meet their needs. Because it was always these things like I'd get a call on a Monday, hey, can you come in tomorrow afternoon and talk to so-and-so from 11 to 12, and then from somebody else from 2 to 3? And the answer always be yes. It didn't mean, I didn't stop looking. I would continue to work the process and continue to reach out to people. But I wasn't getting myself sucked up into things unless it was coming up to a high scoring event. I just let it pass, because the important thing was to keep myself available and only focus on important things. And again, I should have led, and I apologize. There's 2 basic themes throughout my job search program. One of which is that it basically, maybe there's 3 themes. First one is basically having clarity in everything you do. Clarity in what your target is, clarity in your plan, clarity in your communication. Secondly, it would be that it's all about progress. It's not about activity. And the third thing is that you have to be disciplined. It's a very disciplined approach, that you stay on it and you stay with it. And I can't tell you how many people that they come to my meetings, we have the conversations, they talk about they're going to do something, and then they disappear. And maybe they picked up a project or doing something for a couple weeks or a couple months, and then they disappear, and then they show back up, say, oh man, I really got to get my search in gear. And it's a stopping and starting thing. And it's not a surprise that they haven't found something. And now they're 9 months older, and they've had another 3 or 4 month interim assignment. They tell me that they want a permanent job. Well, you just took yourself out of the market for 9 months to work for 4 months. And so people do stuff like that, which is, you can do it. There's 1,000 ways to get to work, but I can give you a path that works. I think we have a question here. No, I don't want, no, I think I think we'll just keep going with the questions. Thank you, Cliff. Okay, so that's the ideal job profile. It's basically, it is your goal in mind. And once you've vetted this with your better half, you're gonna have a confidence. You're gonna know what's gonna make you happy. You're gonna have a confidence about that. And when you talk to Cliff or Bob or John or anybody else about what you want to do, and when you network with people, they're going to be convinced that if you say you're all about blue, they're going to be convinced that you're all about blue, and they want to connect you into opportunities that are all about blue. Yeah, and if you do, and that is what, and you'll know that because when you talk to people that don't really know what they want to do, or they say, I could do, there's a lot of things I can do, those people don't get referred. Because the thing is, the person on the receiving end, they don't want somebody who can do everything. They want a blue person or a red person or a red-green person. That's what they want. And they want referrals of people who fit what they want. They don't have time to be a therapist, help you figure out what you want to be. So this is going to give you the chance to really get penetration. And it also becomes a cornerstone of the rest of your documents. Okay, well, what are we doing here? Let's take a minute to use a process like an ideal job profile. Thank you. Only once, usually, never. Good. That's surprising. I'm glad there's that many people who are using something akin to this. So we'll give people another minute to finish off this question before I move on. Okay. I guess it's all right. Let's see, what do we got here? No, okay. Well, what do we got? Are we done here? Okay.
Yes, John, thank you. I had a person interrupt that, so please continue. Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, so all right, let me just close this out. Oh, yeah, these didn't go through. Well, thanks, Anthony. Thanks for trying. Any last questions on the ideal job profile before we move on?
One thing I'd like to add that has become much more something that people, I think, need to focus on even more today than there has been in the past, and that's the issue of, and you have it on the thing, that's the issue of virtual or hybrid perspective. And I think an awful lot of people look at the virtual perspective as saying, oh gosh, that's nice, I don't have to commute, I don't have to do this, I don't have to do that, and therefore, yes, that's a highly desirable element for me. Let me give you a personal perspective. I've been doing virtual for 2 years, and it drives me up a wall. I'm telling you, I would love to be in the position of being able to go back into an office. So I think you have to think very strongly about the fact as to whether or not you're in a position where you are open to a totally virtual perspective.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, so moving on, this is now the second document. Nancy, can we see this? This is the marketing document?
Yes, your bio is up.
Okay, great. So this is a one-pager. Remember, as executives, you know, if you give somebody, if you can condense an executive summary down to one page, somebody will look at it. If you're on 2 pages, the reluctance really goes way up. Okay, got it. I want to make sure I'm not leaving anybody behind. So what are we trying to do in the marketing document? This is the second most important document. This is the document you use for hand-to-hand combat. When I'm out networking with somebody, I don't bring my resume. And the reason why is the resume is historical. It tells you where you've been. This document is all about where you're trying to go. This is very forward oriented. And again, it's about progress. It's not about activity. So when I was having figured out my ideal job profile, I'm now ready to populate my marketing document. So what's my value proposition? And first you lead off with your contact information at the top. Now, I've got my cell number here, but actually when I first came to town, that's my Atlanta, Georgia cell number. So I actually got a landline and I had that so people understand I was local. You can put in DFW, you can put in Dallas, but if you live in some place like Allen or Fort Worth, places kind of at the outer, you know, edge of DFW or whatever's further west of Fort Worth, you probably don't want to do that because people might say, well, you know, the job is over here and you're not going to want to commute, so therefore I'm going to knock you out. You basically just, you know, you know, and so I would just either put Dallas or put DFW or something similarly vague like that. I think at one point I had my zip code. here when I first did this document. Let people know I actually was here. And you've got your contact information. Don't put any street address. I mean, well, you know, data security, better not do that. Value proposition. You're just put down what is your value proposition that's relevant for the job that you're seeking. Then you've got your areas of expertise, anywhere from 8 to 12 is my feeling, and I believe in 2 columns. And the way you organize them, people are going to lead down. They're going to read down the left column, then they're going to read down the right column, and try to group them in some way that makes sense. I've got, like, you know, operational turnaround, strategic planning, financial planning analysis, all different deeply analytical tools. You know, then I get into more wonky stuff like Sarbanes-Oxley, process improvement. And the stuff on the right is just not as important. So you've got to think about, for the job that you're interested in, what are the core skills that they're looking for and that you should be thinking of. So, you know, let's say you're targeting a CFO of a manufacturing firm. That is, and that's what you're targeting. Well, then you've got to think about the areas of expertise you should be demonstrating or should be relevant to that role. And how do you know which ones are relevant? Is that you'd want to be looking at job postings online and seeing what they're listing in their requirements section as the core skills that they're looking for. So, and then the next section is targeted roles. You've got, now ideally you have 1, a maximum of 2. If you got more than 2, basically the impression is if the phone rings, you're in, which is a recipe for disaster. And in my case, back when I was interested in financial roles, it was a very dated form that I was interested. I basically, my whole deal is finance as business partner. So that manifests itself in one of 2 ways. I could either be a finance leader for some kind of a business unit or division or group or whatnot, or heading up field finance, or I was leading FP&A teams, or later on building and rebuilding FP&A teams. So there are variations on a theme, but you know, what you might say here is that you may be, I'm a CFO in the manufacturing industry for companies, you know, up to 200 million. And then I am the CAO / controller of companies north of 300 million or 200 million, whatever the number is. That way you may have 2 targeted roles. You know, where your job might change based on size of company. But, you know, you don't want to have, like, you're in treasury or you're a CFO. Those are very strange combination to use the same value proposition, the same core skills, because they have very different, you know, span of responsibilities. Any questions so far about the marketing document? Okay, we're all good here. Okay, surprising, because this is the hardest document to fill. The most important one is the ideal job profile. The hardest one to complete is the marketing document. The top half isn't bad because you kind of, by now you should know who you are. Well, I'm going to wait until we do the survey here, and then I'll continue on.
Thanks, John. I thought it was a good time to put this in there. Are you currently using any kind of marketing document other than LinkedIn, a 1-page, or who are you? We'll give you just a few seconds so we don't interrupt John's train of thought, because he's humming right along and we're keeping a lot of content going. I'm going to end that poll and share those results. And John, I don't think you'll be surprised.
Actually, I am surprised.
Okay.
Yeah, because the thing is, and John, I'm glad that you're here, but John, I'm going to ask you to jump in just a minute to talk about marketing document. Let me just kind of get through this point, if you will. But I'm surprised that I'm actually excited because your searches are going to really start to accelerate, because this is a very basic step that the majority of the people are missing. So let's get over that hump. Yeah, and let's take,
And John, I agree with this document because we talked about it 10 years ago.
yeah,
And this is so much better than a resume because resumes are dates. There are all kinds of reasons why not. And there's all kinds of stuff in a resume that, as you said, is backward looking, not forward looking. So where you want to go is not in your resume, number one. And then number two is it's filled with all kinds of jargon that your average networking contact won't even understand.
right.
But anybody can understand this. And I've walked this document into maybe 30 or 40 different networking contacts, and they end up circling the names of the companies that they have connections with. It's
Exactly,
a no-brainer.
exactly,
I
exactly.
mean, guys, I mean, this is crazy. Please, nobody take your resume to a networking meeting ever again. Never.
No, thanks, John. I appreciate it. And so the bottom half here is the company's interest section. And this is the hard bit. Oh man, how am I going to do that? And you've got to do it. Just like you have to go to the dentist. You got to do it. And it's, and so what I try to do, a couple of things that are important in this section, and that some are obvious and some are not so obvious, is that I trifurcate companies of interest. Because at this point in time, we have a wealth of experience, and depending upon what you're trying to do in your career, you trifurcate this on what makes sense based on your ideal job profile. And you think about your targeted roles that we've discussed here. Now, based on my background, I worked at Coca-Cola and I've worked at Hostess. And I worked at Aramark in a food service business. So I've got food, beverage, and hospitality because I'm thinking people they'd be kind of interested in me because that's where I've worked. I spent a long time at IBM back in the day. So I've got technology services. And then there are other industries because I have a big company background. That's where I spent the bulk of my career. And because I'm thinking about, I could be the head of finance of a business unit or division or wholly owned sub or something. So who has those? Really large companies. So that's why I split it up the way that I split it up. But you might be, for the person who's going to be, wants to either be the CFO of a company that's sub 200 million in rev, or be the controller CEO of something bigger than that. You may break this up into being, manufacturing firms, up to 200 million, greater than 200 million manufacturing firms, and this could be something else entirely, or make it small, medium, and large. It could be. But you use terms that are relevant. Terms that don't use vague words like small, medium, and large. Use words with more precision, like industry names, size of company, size of employees, US-based manufacturing. This could be Asian-based manufacturing, European-based manufacturing. It could be whatever makes sense for what you're trying to accomplish. So trifurcate it in a way that makes sense for you. This could be, maybe this is going to be food and beverage industry companies. This column could be PE firms, PE funds, owners of manufacturing firms. And the other one may be, this might be professional service firms that service that industry. It'd be more likely like in tech or something, or if there, you wanted to reach out to law firms, people who service that particular industry. You've got to figure out what makes sense for you. And then what you need to do, once you figure out how to trifurcate the list, then you've got to populate it. And when you ask yourself, how do you populate it? Well, if you're in a given industry, if you're talking about this industry of particular interest of you, it's because you probably have experience in it. Who are your competitors from your past job? Who sold to this, maybe not competitors, but who sold to the same customer set that your firm did in the past? Then there are other tools that are available. Some people have outplacement and they have access to databases where they can pull information. Other people there are other services available. There's the book of lists. Now, I don't know if y'all are subscribers, but I don't even know if you all see this, but I just got my latest version in the mail come December. And there's umpteenth kinds of lists here. If you've got a DBJ membership, then you can access this information all the time. You don't have to wait for the book list to come out. You can always go and access their list and see what's going on. There are databases. There's a database called ZoomInfo that we use at work, which is phenomenal in terms of finding companies. And you can sort by all different criteria to go drill down and find out who the competitors are, or who the companies are. There's DMB, so you can go to the research library in your local city library and try to get their assistance and find out what data resources they have. If you have a local alma mater, you may be able to go back to their library and their outplacement and check with their outplacement office and see if they have access to a service that you can go pull these queries. You can go to a FENG meeting and ask around, say, hey, who's got outplacement service? Years and years ago, actually it was here in town. There was a gentleman who, John Wexler. You all know John, maybe you've met him in the FEI meeting, really nice guy, finance guy in the banking space. He was in an outplacement program, same firm I'd been with years ago. And I knew they had a particular search engine. And I told them, I didn't have an outplacement when I came to Texas. And so I told him, I said, look, I know how to use that software. Instead of, if I come in as your guest one day with your password, we'll sit down and I will go pull whatever data queries you want to give you your target list. And I just need access for about 10 minutes after that. He's like, sure, deal. So I went in there, spent like an hour sculpting his list out and spent 10 minutes on mine. We both had exactly what we needed. And so, I traded my time to help him get the data he needed. So let's see, we've got, okay, here's Carl's good question. Do you share the marketing document in your resume with recruiters? Yeah, I'll give the recruiter my resume first, but I always leave with my marketing document. I just, because I don't really, I won't network with, well, it would be rare that I would be networking with a recruiter and show them a marketing document because I tend to network with industry leaders. But like if I was to sit down with Cliff or John or Bob or whatever, yeah, I would certainly give them my marketing document because they would get it. But the thing is I've got somewhat of a concern with sharing people my target companies because now the guys we're talking here, Cliff and John and Bob, are extremely credible and ethical, and they won't blast your resume out. But there are recruiting firms who will understand where you're trying to go, and they will blast your resume to these people. And I've seen people lose out on opportunities because they'll be progressing they'll go ahead, they'll try to apply to a firm. So, we've already gotten your resume from Robert Half, for example. And so we're not using recruiter on the search, so we can't touch it. Or I've seen that happen to people, so they couldn't even get into a search that they would have been a great fit on. And I myself have had a recruiter interfere with my pursuit. And they said, so-and-so is claiming that they submitted your resume. And I said, who? I don't even know that person. And they sure as sunrise don't have the rights to my document. So I tend not to share my marketing document with recruiters because as a basic rule, I think that's a better idea. You want to share the top half, that's fine. But with recruiters, I'd rather share my ideal job profile. That I'd rather share, and my resume, and leave it at that. Because you may be able to network if there are firms that would prefer not to use recruiters, and you have the ability to network in to talk to the right person, then that's probably a higher path for success. But there are going to be targeted companies that recruiters have wonderful relationships with, and that's your targeted path for success. So it just, I think it's just better, just, just to have, to kind of focus, but the thing is, if the recruiters know what makes you happy, then as they come across opportunities where they can place candidates, they will place you. They will get your name in the mix. And so,
I'm gonna add, if I might, even if you do use recruiters, if you're a perfect match or a good match and you want to talk to them, and a recruiter has sent your resume, and then another recruiter has sent your resume because they blanketed, you're out of contention, because the company who hires you won't know who to pay. They won't know, they'll sit back there and think, well, gosh, I'm going to get in an argument over what organization represents this candidate. I don't want that argument, so I'm just going to not have that candidate.
yeah,
That's not really true. As Cliff and I have been out there doing this, and what happens is the candidate, the recruiter who presented the candidate first gets paid. And you have to go back to the email document and the date on the email, and that's the one who gets it. I mean, because a lot of people are not doing exclusives. So you're going to be out there with 3 or 4, people anyway. So yeah, they have, that's what I found with over the last 12 years, is that the client picks the recruiter who submitted the candidate first, over and over again. Cliff, I don't know if you see the same thing, but.
Yeah, I think the issue is when it's an unsolicited resume. When a recruiter hears about the opening and just finds a couple of good profile, isn't hired by the company and hasn't called a candidate. But yeah, if 2 firms are working on it, then generally the one who sends the resume gets there first, but the second one usually will find that out because the client will tell them, or the candidate will let them know they've already been sent. We don't have too much trouble with this,
so, yeah.
Yeah.
When I came to town, before I shared my resume with anyone, I went to a couple of FENG meetings. I talked to a couple of folks, and I asked them who are the recruiters that they would trust always. And then so it came down to Cliff and John and Bob and Debbie Williams and Jim Ashworth. And those are the only people who ever got my resume. I didn't give it to anybody else.
Well, you might see this be more of a problem is like that 3-year person coming out of EY or something, where there's just a lot of positions for that person, and you might get some younger recruiters out there, pushing it around the market, that kind of thing. But we haven't had a lot of trouble. Disputes happen, but not that often. But I agree, John, you definitely want to know who's got your resume and get up front. Please don't send my resume without talking to me about a position that you've been hired to help fill.
And that, and I always asked, if some people resume, is it, what's your relationship with the hiring authority? And, do you have an agreement with him to place candidates? So there's certain firms that I learned in Atlanta, you don't deal with.
Okay, so I haven't seen it in a long time, but what I used to see quite a bit of was, understand this, there is no barrier to entry to become a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that says that you have to go to school or that you have to have qualifications and you have to have anything. So there are a lot of folks out there, pardon me, there used to be a lot of folks out there that they were just looking for a little bit of income someplace. They would simply go to like a LinkedIn or someplace else, and they would find an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And they would take resumes, they would imply on large areas, on large groups, that they have this job that they're going to represent. And so they'll get, 500 resumes, and then they do what's called spray and pray. They'll just spray it out to every possible, resume. They'll spray it out to every possible company they can think of and pray that somebody will respond. That has happened. It hasn't happened to my knowledge in quite a while, but it still could. And, it leads credence to the fact, and if they say, well, who was the first one that sent the email? Well, the spray and pray guy maybe did, and you don't know that recruiter, that company doesn't know that recruiter. Again, yeah, I think you have a high probability of possibly being knocked from the job just because they don't want to have to argue with with two recruiters. So be careful who you send your recruiters you send your resume to.
Yep. Okay. Now, Kurt, you ask a very good question. The marketing document, are more companies of interest better than few? And the answer is that more is better. And so the way we do this here, this document, is that when you fill this out, is, I don't know, maybe there's 15 lines or so, 15 to 18 lines, is that within each column, you have to have at least one break. If you want to have 2 breaks, that's fine. I usually try to go for about 2 breaks. And but don't put the breaks on this on the same line for multiple columns, because there is something about, see, the mind abhors a vacuum. And that when you're looking at this document and you're going ahead and you see a blank space. Now, if you've got them all in the same line, it just looks like it's a part or visual parting or segmentation. But when you've got a blank space, it says, oh, this is incomplete. The mind wants to fill in that blank. I can't tell you how many times I said that. People, oh, they'll actually say, oh, it's not complete, or I see you've got some open spaces. Well, you talk about PepsiCo and Dr. Pepper. Well, my brother-in-law works at Coca-Cola. Do you want to talk to them? Well, see, that's a great idea. Yeah, I would like to. And so you go ahead and then it engages people to become more involved in the document. It's not something, they're not staring at a painting. It's a working document. And that's really essential. So, and they'll get to it. And within this, the power of actually getting to specific companies, because like, in your, your ideal job profile, you're looking for a CFO in a manufacturing firm, up to $200 million. If you say that to anybody you meet on the street, they understand the words, but it's not actionable information. Like Cuba Gooding Jr., help me help you. And so that's what you want to do. But when you get to the specifics of companies, you don't have to be in a manufacturer. You don't have to be a CFO. You don't have to know what somebody's revenue is, or what industry they're in. I know that company. My brother-in-law works there. My neighbor works there. Our kids are in Girl Scouts together. We're on Little League. Our sons are Little League together. Our daughters are Little League together. I mean, it's whatever. People are able to make the connection because you've gotten specific with people. And once you get it, they can wrap their brain around the name of an individual company.